Welcome on behalf of the Patterson Foundation in beautiful, sunny Sarasota, Florida. We welcome everyone from across the country today to one of our exciting workshop sessions. This is workshop 3 in our National Philanthropy Scan. And today's topic is digital access and devices, scaling the work domestically and internationally with corporate and nonprofit partners. My name's Sherry Corrier. I'm the initiative manager with the Digital Access for All team. And we have an awesome team behind us with digital access, and you'll be meeting some of those folks. Next, I'd like to just move along and spend just a couple moments making sure everyone understands what the Patterson Foundation is all about. We're also here with our co-sponsors, the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. In today's session, we ask that you introduce yourself in the chat box. So if you're in that chat box right now, we'd love to see you with your name, your organization, and your role if it fits there. So if you'd rename yourself, that would be great on the screen. And using the chat box, we'd love to see you say hello. Also, if you could, please mute yourself today. And that will allow all of our participants the ability to share with everyone. Always feel free to use the chat box with any questions, concerns you might have, or just tidbits you'd like to add about the work you're doing on behalf of the topic. Raise your hand, of course, digitally when we get to the point in time where we're working with our various breakout rooms and during this session. We are recording this session to everyone's knowledge, but the recording is off the record. We want you to share openly in and during the breakout sessions. We hope you'll feel comfortable doing that, and we hope we've given enough time for that. We also would love to encourage all of you to join the conversation on our Twitter and also with our Campaign for Grade Level Reading partners. The hashtags are located on this particular slide. I'll give you a second to take a look at those. And then just to mention, we're partnering with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, and we will have future workshops. You'll hear about the next one at the end of today's session. With that, I would like to just mention briefly the Patterson Foundation's work within the space. So on our next slide, we do work with people, organizations, and communities. We work in a 4-county region to help strengthen the efforts of people, organizations, and communities in ways that foster wide participation. And along with that, in fact, working partnership with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading on a national level and local level, we are excited to be partnering on co-sponsoring these events. I'd like to move right on and introduce our 3 presenters. We have a great lineup today, and we want to give as much time to those participants as possible. So first joining us, Scott Henley with Digitunity. And all of you that pre-registered should have received the full bio of all 3 of these wonderful presenters, but Scott is the executive director since June of 2019. Next, we also have Karin Smoley, who's the Senior Director of Community Impact for Charter Communications. And then third presenter we have with us today is Kirsten Young, the Director of Sustainability Programs with American Tower. We're so excited to have these presenters here and to talk more about our session today and the work that's happening with the National Philanthropy Scan. I'd like to introduce to you Michael Zimmerman. And Michael is our National Initiative Development Lead through the Patterson Foundation and has worked primarily these last 12 months on the National Philanthropy Scan. Michael, welcome to today, and thank you for leading the session.
Thank you, Sherry, and thank you everyone for joining us. I'm Michael Zimmerman. I'm a fellow here at the Patterson Foundation, and I had the opportunity to, and still am, working with Digital Access for All as the National Initiative Development Lead. And at the Patterson Foundation, we're a curious bunch. We like to ask questions. We tend to show up with questions, and we want to discover what's going on where, what's possible, who's doing what, and how can it help. And I think with this curiosity, it led us into an entire exploration of the landscape of digital access and philanthropy to discover what are funders doing where around the country and around the world? And so we spoke with over 30 funders from CSR departments, corporate social responsibility, to foundations that are private, to community foundations, and to organizations that are invested in digital access, equity, and inclusion, to find out what are they doing, how are they approaching this work, with what strategies, what have they learned, what didn't work, and why didn't it work, and how are they shifting and evolving their strategies with what didn't, to find out what may work and with whom they can do it, and who those partners can be. So with that in mind, we published a national philanthropy scan on digital access, which shares widely what we discovered, who's doing what where, what's working, what isn't, what are the challenges. And of course, this is never ending, because what we learned 6 months ago to a year ago will change as of today and going forward. So we invite you to be part of this exploration, to find out what's possible. And I think that's why we're coming together today, to learn about who we are, what we're doing, and why we care so deeply about this work. And so I'm joined here by pioneers in the field, and we're going to dive in to the very theme of digital access and devices, scaling the work domestically and internationally with corporate and nonprofit partners. We're grateful to be joined by each of you. Thank you so much. And I'm going to start off, let's kick off with Kirsten Young. As everyone knows, Kirsten is the Director of Sustainability Programs at American Tower Corporation. Kirsten, I'd like for you to tell us a little more. Tell us about how American Tower is scaling devices and digital access internationally, and tell us about the role American Tower plays in that greater device and digital access ecosystem abroad.
I would love to. Thank you, Michael. Thanks to the Patterson Foundation for including me in this, and of course also the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited to learn from you all as well. So a little bit about American Tower. We are a global provider of wireless communication infrastructure. But what does that mean? We build towers and other types of communication infrastructure all over the US, but also in 25 countries across the globe. And I have the great privilege of working on the sustainability team. Of course, you heard my title, it's sustainability programs, but it's not really about environmental sustainability that I work in. I'm kind of the S in the ESG efforts. So I oversee a program called Digital Communities, and these are physical spaces that are equipped with devices, with connectivity, with instructor-led or sometimes self-guided educational instruction, and there's career skilling and healthcare services. It's just a one-stop shop for all of these resources through connectivity, because we're trying to improve quality of life for communities through connectivity. And so we have 445 of these digital communities all over the globe in 15 different countries. That's in Latin America, in Sub-Saharan Africa, and then also in India, where the program started about 10 years ago. And we have a goal to build 2,000 of these by the end of 2026. It's an ambitious goal. We're on it. We're in it. And I'm glad to be here today, because we're going to talk about some of the challenges that we face, which I think are some similar ones to you all as well. So one of the things that makes us a little different, and I hope this different becomes more normal, but is that I work in a CSR capacity, right? A corporate social responsibility capacity. And typically in many CSR programs, it's a corporation works with nonprofit, and that's it. There's some exchanging of data and of course some funding and all different kinds of other resources. But we're looking at things just a little bit differently. We're trying to build an ecosystem to solve a problem. So what we really want to do is bring other corporations in with us, nonprofits, governments, just anyone who is like-minded and can bring in cash or in-kind resources, all with the goal of digital equity. And so what that may look like is we're looking for user device manufacturers or refurbishers, mobile network operators, networking devices, educational curriculum organizations, governments of ministries, funders, nonprofits, everybody to come in together to find those locations where we could make some impact together. And so I know what we're talking about today is devices. I come to today to say, yes, devices is a huge part of this. And it's actually one of the more expensive pieces for our program for digital communities in our capital expenses, the initial expenses that we put out. And we couldn't do any of that work in education, career skilling, or healthcare without those devices. So we're trying to find solutions. We want some companies, some nonprofits, some refurbishers to come in with us and say, okay, let's look at this one specific place in Kenya, for example. And I say, well, I've got tower sites there, and you want to get into the community and provide educational content. And there's another device company that wants to come with us. We're just really looking to build that ecosystem together. And we definitely believe that just giving devices, it's probably not going to solve all the problems, that we need to kind of look at all the needs of a community and then come in together, because digital equity isn't easy, but it's possible, like if we all kind of put our heads together on that. So that's kind of where we stand, Michael. I don't know if you have any more questions on that.
So first of all, thank you, Kirsten. I think you hit on many themes here, and one that pops out that I feel a lot of funders wrestle with is this: we're not sure if we're ready to make an investment in devices, because in 2 to 3 years, the devices that we would provide to community members that are in need of devices to access society at large and resources, those devices may become obsolete. But at the same time, that we know that's a catch-22, because without any device, no device means no access. And how is that a solution? So there has to be a starting point. So I think you highlight that, and of course collaboration is key in finding those partners, which also you speak to here. Thank you, Kirsten. I want to move to Karin Smoley. Karin, who is the Senior Director of Community Impact at Charter Communications, has an overall program, and Charter has an overall program, and Karin doesn't have an overall program invested in $8 million. Charter Communications, however, does, of $8 million in Spectrum Digital Education, which supports nonprofit organizations that offer broadband education, training, and technology. Karin, I know we'd like to learn a bit more about the program and its impact on communities, including the biggest challenges facing Charter's digital education endeavors, and if you could also tie that into how that plays out in device access.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Michael. Thanks for having me. It's great to see everyone. So what Kirsten and American Tower is doing is absolutely amazing. We actually take a very different approach. So a couple of things just to make sure everyone understands. So Charter Communications is a domestic-based company. So we operate in 41 states nationally. For those of you not familiar with the name Charter Communications, it goes under the brand name Spectrum. So some of you may be more familiar with that brand name, which is why our program is actually named Spectrum Digital Education. So the company supports communities where our employees and our customers live and work. And as I mentioned, that's at 41 states nationally. So we created this digital education initiative in 2017. And as you mentioned, since that time, we've awarded more than $8 million in cash and in kind. And in fact, it kind of adds on to what Kirsten was talking about. That in-kind element is really important, because in-kind can be where your laptops and your devices and those things that we're talking about are coming from. I would say that, our biggest challenge is just that there's not enough money out there, right? There's not enough resources. And so, that's true for us, that's true for everyone. And so the way we've structured it is to ensure that we're both doing the cash and the in-kind. So the way we operationalize our support is once a year, we do a request for proposals, and it's open to any organization who has people that they serve within our communities. So you don't actually have to be based there. We don't serve Washington, D.C., but if your organization is headquartered in Washington, D.C., but services, let's say New York City or Dallas, then you can get funding from us. And so for us, it's really important that we made it a general request for proposals so that we were not excluding anyone. our concern was that if we self-identified those organizations or we went to seek those organizations, we'd miss a bunch. And so we wanted to make sure it was open to everyone. I would say, you know, for us, we do year-over-year funding. So it's 1 year at a time. And I know that can be a challenge, but we mindfully set up the program so that you could be an organization who receives funding year-over-year and you're not excluded. And in fact, in our 7 years of awarding, we do have an organization that we have awarded every single year. And we have many organizations we've awarded multiple times year-over-year. But in terms specifically about the devices, I think the other great aspect to our program is that we do not exclude devices. In fact, we do two things. You can use funding that you receive from us to pay for devices, and we have donated hundreds of devices throughout the program. So we not only allow you to use the funding to purchase devices, but we also do provide laptop supports. And so the funding that our organization, I just want to pull up a few stats and let you all know. The funding that we've given over the last 8 years to date has been in 22 of our states that we've, there have been more than 13,000 devices distributed, either from donations of devices that we've made or purchases through the funding that we've supported. And we've helped thousands upon thousands of people during that time. I think it is really important to also mention that one of the other aspects is that it's coupled with classes. You know, as we talk about, you can have a device, but if you don't know how to use that device, you're not connected with that device is not that important anymore. So that's another aspect of our program is it's all of things. We want to make sure that you have the device, you have the access, you know how to use that device. And so I know there are a lot of funders on this, so happy to answer any questions about how we operationally put that together and support.
Thank you so much, Karen. And so it's what I appreciate about the approach here is this intentionality in ensuring that it's not just about let's get the devices in the hands, but also this other question around what does digital literacy look like for those beneficiaries that are receiving those devices. And I know a lot of funders are also thinking about that, you know, how to embed, you know, that type of intentionality in their grant making. So I appreciate you sharing, you know, how Charter approaches that in its program. So thank you, Karen. I want to, before we move on to our next part here, I want to also bring in Scott Henley. Scott is the Executive Director of Digitunity. And Scott, Digitunity states point blank, owning a computer is the foundation of digital equity. Can you share more about Digitunity's work in the space and walk us through the sustainable solutions that expand device ownership?
Sure. Thank you, Michael. Thank you to the Patterson Foundation for hosting such a great opportunity to have this conversation with you. And of course, if anything piques your interest as we go along here, feel free to reach out after the fact to continue the conversation. But bottom line here is that if I would encourage everyone to kind of zoom all the way out first and think about the fact that 36 million people in America don't have a computer. And a problem of that magnitude requires a systemic approach to finding the solution. It's not going to be solved at the granular level of funding 20 devices, funding 100 devices, a one-time, moment in time fix. What we're trying to advocate is that this is a particularly amazing moment in time in America where such attention and such funding is being contributed to solving broadband connectivity, middle mile, last mile infrastructure, bringing the internet to those who haven't been able to have it before based on infrastructure issues. But there's also an opportunity for us to use some of that funding together with the funding from the philanthropic sector as well to come up with systemic solutions to ensure that people have access to free and low-cost devices on into the future in perpetuity. And our thinking along those lines is that in any community, there really are all the assets required to solve this issue already in place, right? There's companies with lots of technology. There are likely refurbishers. There are lots of philanthropies that provide funding for any number of initiatives. There are volunteers. There are great frontline organizations, community-based organizations doing the work. So you have all these pieces that are disparate puzzle pieces. And what this moment in time requires is just some organizing. And so what Digitunity is doing, and we're pretty unique as an organization, we're an independent nonprofit organization with a national lens, and we do our work by focusing on local areas, either in providing technology to local nonprofit organizations that need tech to support their constituents, or we also work together with communities. We're working in 11 different cities right now to help guide the development of a sustainable solution for device access. I would encourage all of you, as you're thinking about how to get involved in closing the digital divide, if you're not yet, to think about encouraging organizations in your community to think systemic and think about long-term solutions that can build the machine, right? That corporate tech can feed into it. Philanthropic dollars can feed into funding the refurbishment of the devices. Community-based organizations can serve as distribution points. All the pieces are there, right? So what Digitunity is trying to do is advocate for policies that support this, work together with communities to help come up with long-term solutions, and just change the frame of reference on this issue. When you're thinking about funding devices, it's not just about going to Best Buy and purchasing devices. It's about building the process and the programs that lead to solving this in perpetuity. Because I was thinking of an analogy this morning of how I can convey this more strongly, and I was thinking about how, people would be enraged if water was water pipes, water service was brought to every house in America, but only a certain percentage of the population could actually have a faucet to access it. That's what we're talking about here with the internet. If you don't have a computer, you don't have the ability to benefit from all the things the internet provides, including employment and telehealth and education and so on and so forth. So yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity to talk about this, and definitely look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Thank you, Scott, for the incredible work that you're doing and that Digitunity is doing with both that community level lens, but also nationally. It's clear to see how your work can catalyze collaborations that can strengthen the entire ecosystem. And I think that's something that's so important right now. So in thinking about our ecosystem and discovering more, I want to actually invite everyone to turn on your cameras and unmute I see, okay, thank you. I'm seeing screens pop up here. So this is great. And we're going to actually change our view back to our entire audience and workshop here, because we want to jump into conversation with everybody, because we're curious what you're doing and what this looks like for you and what are the challenges. So let's jump in. Just show of hands, and you can either use the raise hand feature or you can put your hand up in your on video. How many of us are working with organizations that are investing in or working to expand device ownership in our communities? Just want to see a show of hands or raise hand feature here. Wow, fantastic. I'm seeing more hands raised. Okay. Okay, I would love, that's excellent. So actually, if I may call on someone here who has their hand raised, let's see. May I ask, I'm sorry, I'm gonna pick on someone here. Would someone like to share? I saw Bunmi Esho, is that how pronounced? Bunmi.
Yeah, the N like Nancy is silent.
Okay, Bunmi, might you share with us a little bit more about how you are either investing in or expanding device ownership in communities? We'd love to learn a little more. And could you tell us, the organization or funder where you're working, et cetera?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for opening the mic for me. So my name is Bunmi Esho. I'm with Endless OS Foundation, and we have been in existence for over 10 years now, really looking towards digital access. We're aware, just like many of the speakers had mentioned, that when you think about barriers towards digital access, it is the device, it is the connectivity, it is the literacy, the digital literacy, and it's the engagement. And we started off really kind of thinking around the learners, but that also connects to the families and the community. So one of the things that we have done was when we think around the device, we think around the affordability of that and the reality that in order to make it sustainable, you have to kind of think of the software that goes with it. So we have our operating system, Endless OS, Linux-based open source that has all the different tools and the apps. Think of Microsoft Office, we have LibreOffice, think of Adobe, we have GIMP, all free and open source. So that reduces costs when you think about the sustainability, every year being able to access subscriptions and so forth. And then kind of to take that the next step, we really started looking at how do we put this in the hands of our community? And we've developed in essence, an affordability plan. So our Endless Laptop Plan is an opportunity to be able to go to communities, partner with organizations. For example, we've been working with Grameen Miami to support their Latina entrepreneurs. They wanted laptops. They really haven't had kind of an option to be able to purchase that. And so they're able to purchase this over time. So every month they're paying it, they have their device, and by the end of the year, it's paid for and they don't have to think about that. But through that time, they've been able to own their device.
Thank you, Bhumi. Fascinating the way Endless OS Foundation approaches how to essentially break barriers of access for community members in need of devices, and then thinking about sustainability moving forward so that they're not paying for, like you said, subscriptions. I want to give our presenters an opportunity to either comment on Endless OS's work and Bhumi, what Bhumi shared with us.
I'd be happy to jump in and just offer this comment that I so appreciate your work. I know that there are several refurbishers, nonprofit refurbishers that are in our network. We have a national alliance of nonprofit refurbishers that serve communities all over the country, and many of them use Endless OS to they load that onto the devices that they distribute because it costs $6 per Windows license for each refurbished device. And when you think about that little incremental expense for every single device that goes out, it really is a barrier that's overcome with open source. And so thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Bhumi and Scott, for sharing more. I'd like to invite we have time for one more person to share a little more about what their organization is doing, or their as a funder, what they're doing to invest in device ownership. Let's see here. I'm looking at raised hands.
I would like to share.
Okay. Yes, Imani.
Hi, everyone. Just wanted to shed a different perspective on the issue.
Oh, sorry, Imani, do you mind sharing where you, with which organization and your, sorry, I should have asked that before.
I am with SOTV, which is Stems on the Vines. I am in Kansas City, Missouri. I am the director of SOTV. And
thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I put in the chat that the digital divide is much more than just connectivity and devices. And Bhumi so eloquently emphasized the point of literacy, digital literacy. Our students learn things such as coding, artificial intelligence, and we also want to help refurbish computers. We want the students to be able to do that, to be able to get those skills, and have the students set up businesses where they go and service people in low-income communities, and also startups. We want our students to be able to learn cybersecurity and provide that service to startups and small businesses. And it's a win-win situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And Thank you, Imani, for sharing. You know, I wish we had time for everyone else to share it, because I feel that each of us is bringing important aspects of, you know, different angles we're taking to approach, you know, widespread device ownership in our communities, and really, you know, break down the barriers of getting devices into people's hands. At this point, we're going to move into breakout rooms, and we're going to actually have a chance to continue these conversations in smaller groups. So everyone here voted when they registered for this funder workshop on a question that they'd like to explore in their breakout rooms. And there was actually an overwhelming response in favor of exploring the following question. What does an effective ecosystem of corporate and nonprofit partners look like at the local level and in communities? So we're going to broadcast that message when you get into your breakout rooms. Let's move everyone into breakout rooms now, and we'll be excited to jump into conversation. So please click the join breakout room now box that probably just appeared on your screen, and turn on your cameras, unmute, and we'll see you back in a 15 or so minutes.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming back. We'll be getting back on the road here in just a few seconds. Just great discussion. Michael.
Okay. I know, Yvette, we see I know all our groups were having great discussion around this question. And I was just hearing from Yvette here, the importance of coalitions. We're going to dive into our share outs. And so I'd like to first invite Rachel to share your notes and share with us what was discussed in your breakout room.
Thanks, Michael. So we had a lot of great conversation around what people are currently doing in the digital space and world. And the summary from that conversation of what people are doing is 3 main things really came about. It's really about devices, connectivity with meaningful high-speed internet, and digital literacy. So we thought then about how can people come together in an ecosystem, in a community, to put aside themselves wherever they're working and work together as a community to solve these issues. So then we talked a lot about schools and how can we collaborate with schools, because it's great when children have access during school hours and have a device like an iPad or a laptop, but if they can take it home with them, a lot of times they won't have connectivity at home, or they don't get to keep the device after, you know, school or outside of school. So we talked about out of school learning, OST, and having activities where the caregivers and parents can do those activities with their children and you know, learn together and reduce that anxiety and be hyper local and in tune to the activities and issues revolving around digital literacy and devices in the community. Kirsten, did I miss anything?
You got it all.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That's fantastic. Let's move along to our second breakout room. Kelly Alexander, can you share your screen and share more about what was discussed?
Yes, absolutely. Is my screen showing?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes, absolutely. I was with Scott, and our room really looked at that without that three-legged stool, without all the pieces of the puzzle. How is there even a look at telehealth, teletherapy, even a look at those resources without first paying attention to all those pieces of the puzzle? And then looking at, you know, an effective ecosystem of all of these partners and players, there has to be a leadership and a catalyst in a community with that approach. And so with that ecosystem thinking is the right formula to put a scale on what the environment even looks like, and then getting a catalyst to promote that. So it's I think Lauren is the one who shared this, connecting with people to get them connected. And then a look at how can we be sustainable with devices, with this work, with people? How can that effort and that work be on a sustainable level, while also meeting people where they're at, getting in front of them and ensuring that everyone's comfortable. And again, with a look at that leadership, a look at who's doing boots on the ground and that sustainability piece. But Scott, is there anything that we should also point to?
No, I think you captured most of it. I know there was a question right at the very end about sustainability with of the technology, and I'll just say the technology reuse is an environmentally sustainable, good approach, along with responsible recycling at the end of the device's use. And so that's the punctuation mark I'll put on that.
Great, thank you.
Great, that's excellent. Thanks so much, Kelly, for sharing. Let's move along to Maribel Martinez. Can you share with us your notes and some takeaways from your breakout room?
Happy to, Michael. So I had the pleasure of hosting quite a few vocal folks in breakout room 3, and I've taken the liberty of highlighting some repeating themes. So I did notice that the word inclusivity popped up a few times, as did trust and transparency. And so when thinking about funding projects and how they're structured, short-term or long-term, one of the most important things that came up was making sure that the work is sustainable across systems, that it's inclusive, that conversations include stakeholders, that we're playing to people's strengths, stakeholder strengths, but that these relationships, all of them, are really part of an ecosystem and they're all equally important. We also had the opportunity to dive into the additional questions for consideration. And I think the one thing that strongly emerged from that brief conversation was that computers can't just sit. And I know I talk about this all the time. If you give someone a computer and they're not able to connect to affordable internet and they don't know how to use it, it's going to sit like a giant paperweight. And we definitely don't want that. And so that's something that funders think about. Is there a comprehensive approach to device distribution, to placement? And the other theme that came out, which I thought was really interesting and really illuminating, was the data out there that is available is so important, because if the data is skewed, if it is flawed or corrupt in any way, it is really going to deter funders potentially from funding projects. And so this came up in the conversation as well. Sade contributed about how in her area in the Central Valley, coverage maps are misleading funders when it comes to resources. So, neighborhoods appear connected, but they aren't. And so it takes a fair amount of education to sway people away from those opinions when you see it in black and white. So these are some of the main takeaways. But I think most importantly is that this is definitely a long-term game.
Thank you, Maribel. Some pretty awesome perspective shared in breakout room 3. And we're going to move to Deb Sakalarios, who facilitated breakout room 4. Deb, if you could share your notes and takeaways.
Hi, great. Assuming everyone can see my screen. We had an interesting conversation and a lot of similar themes that were mentioned, but just to re-highlight from our team or our group, really the essential, the partnership between government, corporations, and nonprofit. But it's not just coming up with kind of this three-way partnership, but it's making sure that there's really true transparency and really understanding of the role of each of the entities in the partnership. And something that came up is that often the nonprofits can be the one who understand and communicate the needs of the community. They can also be the avenue to deliver devices to those in need. Another point that was raised was just thinking about when funders are considering grants, that really need to make sure that the grants are accessible and not overly burdensome. Just making sure that there are clear expectations and eligibility, but just also making sure we are being clear and making it something that funder or nonprofits can easily apply for. And then on the corporate side, the strategies, oftentimes, I think they're, or not, I don't want to say oftentimes, but in some cases, corporations might wanting to send the message that they are offering free or low cost devices. But the corporations really need to make sure the strategies are indeed effective and not just offering quote unquote strategies and other non-effective solutions. So I would say in this three-way partnership, making sure that the nonprofits are communicating and really helping to come up with what are the corporate strategies that they're implementing. And then lastly, we started getting into the value of coalitions, which I think is just an important point when we're thinking about this three-way partnership. Partnerships can be formed in many different ways. And I think the point that was being made was just the value of kind of an ongoing collaborative and constant conversations for those partnerships to be truly effective.
Thank you so much, Deb, for sharing takeaways from Breakout Room 4. You know, I can already tell, I wish I could have the extension of this already, because from these takeaways, I wish this could be even shared widely, and why not? You know, maybe we will discuss that, because there was such valuable and important information around strategy, approach, needs, challenges, and collective action around digital access and devices. And so I really appreciate everyone's participation in this. We're going to ask everyone to keep their screen, turn their videos back on. We're going to enter into a question and answer period. And before we jump into our Q&A, we have dropped a link in the chat, or we're about to drop a link in the chat. This is to the Patterson Foundation's After Action Survey. So it'll take you 60 seconds. We invite everyone to just click this link, and while we're doing our Q&A right now, take a moment to fill out that form and help us understand what you're looking to, if you're looking to join us again for another session, or what you hope to get out of these workshops. Let us know. It helps us understand, how we can ensure that what we're talking about is relevant to your work. So again, we're a curious bunch here, and we want to know. So help us out, fill out that survey as we move into our question and answer period. And so thank you all for doing that. We appreciate your feedback, and we're so grateful that many of you have joined us today. At this point, we're going to invite everyone to either use the raise hand feature or drop in the chat questions they have for our presenters, or questions they may have in general about devices and digital access. What are you wrestling with in your communities? Where are the impasses? What is it that really needs to be addressed? What's at the forefront? What has been so successful that you feel it's important we know about? We really want this to take this opportunity to bring those questions and comments forward. So we invite folks to come forth, ask some questions. I know our presenters are eager to jump in and continue the conversation with you. Let's see, who has our first question? Okay, so
Michael, I'll do one.
Okay, Lauren, yes.
I would like to know anyone who lives in a rural community, if they have had any support from local broadband companies, as we have had here in Sarasota County with the MIACA. They call it broadband for the boonies. That's that's the nickname for it. But they basically go to local landowners and they ask them if they can use their land to lay broadband for those rural communities, kind of pro bono, in kind. And a lot of the local landowners, they say yes. And I was just curious, for those of you who are rural and who may be affiliated with rural communities, if that's ever anything you've considered going to a broadband company and proposing. I know that's kind of a big question.
Hi, Lauren. Sade here with Beacon. So the Central Valley, there's only bits and pieces that have actual connectivity. The bulk of the Central Valley is rural. And the issue here is that we only have maybe 2 ISP providers, and they tend to monopolize the infrastructure. And so, as I mentioned during our breakout session, we have connected with various other providers, but because of those maps, they're not coming in. And we have other smaller ISP providers, but they are charging our families up the yin yang, and so it's just not even beneficial. So as someone mentioned, these devices that have been offered by the school districts and other funders are sitting on the top of someone's shelf, and it's really sad because we have so many families in need. But I do like that idea of partnering with our ag families and companies to see if we can get some partnerships. And like I said earlier, this is where that collaborative work, that ecosystem, what do we have and what's working well, and who we can get connected to make sure that our families and our communities are connected, connecting people and connecting us. Thank you, whoever said that. I want to quote that somewhere.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Sade. I actually have here another question that someone wanted to ask but couldn't be here. So for our presenters, what's needed to bring funders together to help address the ecosystem and public policy issues in the United States and abroad? I'll repeat that. What's needed to bring funders together to help address the ecosystem and public policy issues domestically and abroad?
That's a big question, Michael. I'll and I'm going to answer it. No, I think a couple things. I think awareness of this issue front and center is the biggest thing. For funders to get involved, I think they need to understand that while the federal government is committing $65 billion to expanding broadband access and advanced digital equity, it's not going to be the total answer. And so making sure that everyone in America has the opportunity to benefit from all the opportunity the internet provides is going to require ongoing attention. So I think that's part of it. Second is, and this is one thing that we've been working on, is advocating for policies that do move the needle. We were successful after 5 years of effort to just get legislation passed at the end of 22 and signed into law that will unlock federal surplus computers specifically for nonprofit refurbishers to advance digital equity in their communities. And so the program hasn't launched yet. It's at the very, very beginning. The president just signed it into law at the end of 2022. But that's just another way that funders or communities or catalysts or people like everyone on this call can get involved in just pushing for policy change.
I have something to add to that as well. I think if you kind of back up a bit and think about what an ecosystem means, right? It's bringing a bunch of different entities together. You've got corporations, nonprofits, governments, social enterprises, people, community, everybody together. There's a lot of egos in that group. And I think I was trying to make a list, and I really like alliteration. So I said listening. So we need to listen to each other, but primarily the community, right? To really hear what's going on. I know everybody's talking about maps and what is out there, but it may not be the truth. Listening. Leadership is another one, because once you bring all these different entities together, someone's got to be in charge. Somebody's got to make it happen. And sometimes that is the nonprofit that's in the local community, but sometimes the capacity is not there. They can't without funding or more people or what have you. So somebody has to have that leadership. And like I said before, the less ego, that was trying to make the L work there, but listening, leadership, and less ego to come together, because if we all really, really, really do have the goal of digital equity, then you really got to be able to let go and kind of come together to find a solution. I love working for my company. And I have to just share this because I hope more organizations, more entities will do this, but we do have these core principles that our company believes in. And one of them is focus on solutions, not problems. And it's real easy to come into any of these calls, to any call, any corporate call, any kind of nonprofit call, any community call, to just talk about the problems. But if we could really focus more on solutions, and involve all the right people and try to stay positive, I feel like action can happen. And maybe that's just my optimism, but I wouldn't do this if I didn't think we could make a difference. So,
Kirsten, thank you, and Scott, thank you. You know, I actually want to use the remaining 2 minutes, because I know we have to close out soon here, to let our presenters, if there's anything you'd like to share with all of us here about just something you feel it's important for us to know, working in digital access space, working with devices, or just the ecosystem at large. Could you give us that, 1 minute? I know you'd want to say more than, than just 1 minute of words, but and there's so much to say, but just 1 minute of, what knowledge would you want to impart on us that we could take with us into our work? I'm going to call on Karin. Sorry, Karin.
I'll jump in, although it's hard to follow Kirsten after that lovely alliteration she gave. So I think just 2 things. I think that, the reality is like Kirsten and I don't do our jobs. We love them, right? Like we do them because we love them. And I think, I'm not trying to give excuses or anything or past funders, but we're also always strapped for resources and we have our own constraints as well. And I think that the people that sit in our positions, by and large, want to help, really believe in the work, and want to get the money into the right hands of the people to make the change happen. And so that said, I'll just end on anyone should feel free to reach out. Michael, I don't know if I can just put my email in the chat and folks can feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to have any conversations as a follow-up.
Please do.
Okay. That's all I have to say.
Great. Scott?
Thank you, Michael. I think I have 2 things that popped into my head. Number one is what we're dealing with here is upsetting the status quo. And that takes work, and that takes vision and lots of effort, and it's a long game. But I have to say that I'm totally optimistic. I really am. That like I've said a couple times in this webinar, like, sorry about that, I hit the wrong button. I'm super optimistic about the future because the pieces are all literally out there, and it just takes willpower and coordination and organization, and we can solve this issue at scale. And so I commend all of you for being here and having the interest in this topic. I mean, it starts with that, right? And so let's get to work.
Great. Well, and Kirsten, anything in that I know you gave a kind of a final.
Yeah, I'm not gonna mess it up.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for joining. Just a round of applause to our presenters and to everyone who joined us here. Pat yourselves on the back. We're not doing easy work. We are passionate about this, and there's a calling, and we're all hearing the calling and responding the best we can. Thank you all for joining us. I'm going to turn to Sherry Courier, who's going to close us out. Sherry?
Yeah, don't leave us yet. Just a couple more minutes and some final thoughts here, and an amazing workshop. And again, thanks to the presenters. And I see in the chat box, it's very active. There's information there, great conversation. Thank you, everyone. This is the 3rd in a series of 8 workshops that we will be conducting. And each workshop, we're building more steam. And everyone's coming on board. Our next workshop series, number 4, is March 7th at 12:30 again, in conjunction with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. And I want to thank Sarah Torian and all of the staff with CGLR who have helped to make sure that the message gets out to a large, broad audience. We have people from all over the country on this call. And so we want to thank you for being so interested in devices. That workshop series number 4 is Digital Access and Telehealth. What's working? What are the challenges? and what are the opportunities. You can scan this QR code here. You can also register based on the follow-up that we send out, but we want to make sure that if you want to keep talking about the subject of the 3 essential elements, connectivity, devices, and skills training, that you stay on board with this group, because again, our goal is to continue the conversation. Also being dropped in the chat is more opportunity to register for that next March 7th, series number 4. And then we'd just like to thank you all for taking the time out today. And again, to our presenters, but mostly to all of you for participating so much in the chat rooms, in the breakout rooms, and this conversation will continue. It continues on with the other subjects. And thank you to our hosts, and thank you to everyone for being here. So have a great day. And Kiara, I think we're going to do one more opportunity here. If we can get everybody to come back on screen and stay on screen, I think between, maybe we'll have Rachel do this for us. Rachel, can you take a big picture of the big group? So if everybody gets your self together here, or how you want to be, we would love to have a great big picture, because look at this wonderful audience. So Rachel, I'm going to turn it over to you to give us some instructions.
Yeah, so if everyone looks at their camera and smiles, and I'll count down from 3, okay? 3, 2, great. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. And great, go on doing the great work you're doing. You've met a lot of people here, and I think you ought to know that you're just building a bigger and more broad network of these conversations to help people, organizations, and communities, not only in your local area, but now across the country and even internationally. So thank you all.